So are you tired of paying the price for perfectionism? Things like procrastination, stress, or even burnout? I want you to watch this video to learn how to go from perfectionist to sustainably productive and self-compassionate. I'm Dr. Tiffany Shelton Mariol, and I am a psychologist, and I'm the owner of Conscious Life Shop. And I make weekly videos on this channel on how to create a manifestation mindset. So if you like videos like that, please subscribe to my channel. Be sure to also hit the notification bell so you're notified when I post every Thursday. Perfectionism is a form of anxiety that can rob you of productivity and also peace of mind. By the end of this video, you'll know how to overcome perfectionism and also the stress that comes along with it. I want to empower you to release perfectionism so you can live life to the fullest. As a recovering perfectionist, I know what it took for me to change my ways, and I can't wait to share them with you. So just jumping right in, my first tip is to become more aware of your perfectionist ways. You want to have a very clear picture of what perfectionism looks like for you. I want you to write down the situations where perfectionism rears its ugly head. Write down the common thoughts you have when you're feeling like you're being a perfectionist. What are also some of the emotions that you experience when you're being a perfectionist? Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it hopelessness? Write down the thoughts. Like I said, are you thinking like, well, I'm not going to do this unless I can do it perfect, or I can't move on if this isn't right. So I want you to really get a clear picture of what perfectionism looks like for you personally. Write it down, do what you can to increase your awareness about it, and that's going to be your first step into using the other tips that I'm going to mention now. So once you have a good sense of how you are a perfectionist and how it shows up in your life and in your mindset, I want you to come up with a couple of mantras that you can use when perfectionism shows up. So when you notice you're being a perfectionist, I want you to use some good enough mantras to remind yourself that there's no such thing as perfection, and to really help you balance out those perfectionist thoughts. Here are a few that I really like. I like done is better than perfect. Progress, not perfection. There's no such thing as perfect. And feel the fear and do it anyway. My next tip for overcoming perfectionism is to start with realistic goals. Sometimes when we're really ambitious or we want to get a lot of things done, we can start off with these goals that are really heavy and sometimes unrealistic. So your dreams can be as big as you want them to, but I want your micro goals and your day-to-day actions to be realistic. Make realistic to-do lists. Chop it down to maybe 3 things, or the best thing to do is maybe one thing that you want to be the highlight of your day. I want you to, when you're setting these little micro goals or things that you want to do, I really want you to think about realistically with your bandwidth of energy, time, and money, what can you get done? And that way you start from a level that isn't set at this perfect goal. It's really about being realistic with what you think that you can get done in a way that feels good for you. The next thing I want you to do is start checking those perfectionist thoughts. You're not going to just let them go without being checked. You're going to stop and start to restructure these thoughts so you can start to overcome this perfectionism. So the first thing I want you to do is check your inner critic. So that inner judgment that you have, that inner critic that shows up for a lot of people with that struggle with perfectionism, I want you to start using self-compassion. And in my new book, Mindful Self-Compassion, and we're actually going to change the title of this as Mindfulness and Self-Compassion, but it's the same book, really gives you tools for your everyday life and your mind and your emotions, as well as in your body and your behaviors. So start using self-compassion to overcome that inner critic. This is a great book. If you are a perfectionist, I put a lot into creating this book and creating practical tools that you can use to increase self-compassion, but that's really going to be a huge factor, and it was for me in overcoming my perfectionism, is really developing a mindset of self-compassion and infusing it into the way that I think, the way that I act, and the way that I cope with emotions. So increase that self-compassion and check those negative thoughts. Another way that you want to check your thoughts when it comes to overcome perfectionism is really start to check into those thoughts that fall into the category of all or nothing. Are you using black and white thinking, like either it has to be perfect or I'm not going to do it at all, or I can't accept that this is even good or celebrate myself since it's not exactly perfect? I want you to check that kind of all or nothing thinking, that black and white thinking, and really allow yourself to think in the gray. Allow yourself to have some space when it comes to evaluating, judging, or even thinking about things. Don't have to be on extremes. You can be in the middle and you can be satisfied in that way. So start checking those all or nothing thoughts as well. Another thing you can do when you're starting to notice that you're being a little bit of a perfectionist is to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen if this isn't perfect? What's the worst thing that can happen, like for me as a mom, if the nap schedule isn't perfect? What's the worst that can happen if I don't perfectly convey myself in this video? You'll usually find that your fears associated with not being perfect are really just that, fears, and they're not realistic. So you can kind of bring yourself back to reality and tune into, okay, it's not going to be so bad if I don't do this thing perfectly. If this venture, this new business doesn't go perfectly, if anything, I could probably learn something in the process if I make a mistake. And as Oprah says, a queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is only a stepping stone to greatness. So remember that, and don't be afraid to ask yourself, what's the worst thing can happen if I'm not perfect? Another thing I want you to do is to check into your behaviors when it comes to perfectionism. Is it causing you to procrastinate or just be stuck? If you're noticing that you're not taking action because you're afraid that things aren't going to be perfect or exactly the way you want them to be, another thing you can do is just tell yourself, I'm going to take action, progress over perfection, going back to those mantras, and really using your behaviors to overcome that perfectionist mindset. So using your actions, because our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions are all connected. So we can use the behaviors part of that process to really start to shift the way that we think and overcome that perfectionism as well that way. The last thing that I want to offer you, and if you don't take anything else from this video, I want you to take this with you, is don't let yourself be defined by failures or mistakes. You're so much more than any mistake or failure that you have. Not only are failures and mistakes learning lessons that help us grow and transform to become who we want to be in order to manifest what we want, but they also don't define us. They're not our identity. We're so much more than anything that we ever do, or we're so much more than anything that we ever think. And if you can start to separate your identity by reminding yourself when you're being a perfectionist that, hey, my worth isn't dependent on my productivity. My worth isn't dependent on doing this exactly right. My worth isn't dependent on having this perfect picture or whatever it is that you're being a perfectionist about. Really separate your identity, which is, for me, a child of God, a divine being, a spiritual being. Like, that's who I am. It's not about being perfect. It's about separating what I do and what I think from who I truly am. And that has been also a really huge shift, to constantly remind myself and start to align and lean into my true identity as a spiritual being, and not what I do or how I do it, or showing up as this perfect human being or this perfect psychologist, right? It's about really leaning into my true self and my higher self and vibrating with that, and not letting the world or anything else start to define me. So those are my tips on overcoming perfectionism so you can start to live productively and self-compassionately. If you like this video, or if you have any other questions, please comment below. And if you like the video, please like it and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, namaste.